My name is David. I'm a co-chair of this chapter of the London area chapter of the Council of Canadians, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. I just get to do a few housekeeping things at the beginning, and then much more interesting people will have much more interesting things to say to you in a bit. We'll see. We can vote at the end if you want. You can heckle as well. Just the sound levels, etc., we're checking because this event is being video and audio recorded. The cameras will be here on taking in the stage and the panelists. If you in the audience don't want to be recorded, that's fine. If your voice might be if you ask a question, but if you tell us you don't even want your voice on the recording, we can edit it out later. Just tell us. And somebody on stage moderating can even repeat your questions, so it's all, you won't even be in the record. But we'd love to have your voice. We'd love to have your questions, and we're happy to have you here. We always begin events. You know what? We did public events, but we always begin chapter events by remembering that our daily lives, as well as these events, all happen on the traditional lands of Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Lenape, and Chinontan neutral peoples. And their respect for treaties is really, the many different treaties on this land, is really vital to what we do. I'm not going to list them all because we all have better things to get onto. There's one treaty, which is a pre-colonial pact, which is really important to remember. That all the area from what we call the Great Lakes to the Ottawa River were subject to a pact between Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people long before settlers like us, most of us, came and messed things up. And it was called the Dish with One Spoon Wampum. And it's important to remember because it basically said that this land is plentiful enough to support us all, to sustain us all, if we share it properly. And if we come to the table with a spoon, rather than with bladed instruments to hurt each other. So in the spirit of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, let's think about sharing enough that can sustain us all and coming to the table without blades or sharp things. This chapter also, the London chapter also has a safer space statement, which I'm going to read to you. I don't usually read on stage, but it's a specific text that a lot of people have input into. So for a safer space event, as activists, we work to create spaces that are free from as many barriers as possible. We're all responsible for creating spaces, the spaces we desire, by educating ourselves and others and ensuring that we are in dialogue. We recognize that the dynamics of hierarchy, power, and privilege that exist within society are also found within our movements. We believe that failing to address these dynamics alienates and further victimizes our friends and allies and stops us from creating the equitable world we want to strive for. Individuals participating are asked to be aware of their language and behavior and to think about whether it may be oppressive to others. We define oppressive behaviors as any conduct that demeans, marginalizes, rejects, threatens, or harms anyone on the basis of ability, activist experience, age, criminal record, cultural background, education, ethnicity, gender, immigration status, language, nationality, physical appearance, race, religion, self-expression, sex, sexual orientation, or other such factors. We also acknowledge that harassing behavior, including sexual harassment and non-consensual touching, are not permitted, and those who engage in such behaviors will not be welcome at our events. In spaces which this chapter books for events, the Council of Canadians London chapter reserves the right to ban individuals whom we deem to be a threat to the safety of women and other individuals who may be vulnerable to harassment or oppressive behavior. We all have a right to feel safe and valuable. Safe space is both an individual and a communal responsibility. We encourage everyone to be conscious and respectful of the safety of others. The other thing I have to tell you about is that if you need a washroom, they're out the front there. Turn left all the way down to where it says Café 54, turn left again, and there's 3 different washrooms there. You'll notice that we're wearing masks. There are, this project in particular, there may be medically vulnerable people, so we're asking that respectfully that everybody wear a mask or sit at least 2 meters from everyone else. And Lynn from our chapter steering committee is circulating with masks if you didn't happen to have one with you. That's about all I have to say, and so to your great relief, I will shut up and start listening to these more interesting people tell us about why we need public pharmacare now.
My name is Robin Tress. I'm the co-executive director of the Council of Canadians, and I'm so glad to be here with you tonight. I'm so glad to see so many people. This is the 3rd event like this one we've had this week. On Monday, we were in Toronto, and yesterday we were in Kitchener-Waterloo talking about how we need public universal pharmacare now and starting to organize together to get it. So I'm really glad to be having a similar conversation with you tonight. Thank you to David for introducing us and opening up this space. So you might know the Council of Canadians from our last 37 years. You might be newer to us, and we've changed a little bit, surprisingly, in the last 4 decades. So I just want to introduce us on the whole. The Council of Canadians has always been about trying to combat the centralization of power within corporations. We're trying to make sure that things that are meant to be democratic, our government, our institutions, our laws, all of these things should serve the people first. They should serve us, and they should help us to care about each other and create a caring society in the way that David was kind of opening this space so we could do this with care for each other. Instead, what we see and what's growing over the last number of years is that our government and all our institutions tend towards prioritizing profit before caring for people. So our mission is really to break that trend, break the relationships between corporations and government that make that kind of all of these terrible things, the dissolution of our healthcare system, for example, make all of that possible. That's our mission. And so that's why we're here tonight and why we're doing this cross-country tour of town halls to win public pharmacare now. Yeah, you can clap for that. That's okay. Yeah. We encourage rowdy behavior. We encourage hooting and hollering, booing, shaming, also fine. Just like bring yourself and your voice here. We love that. So I've really been saying the words public universal pharmacare, and I want to explain why I'm making such a clear point about that. When we say public, we mean that this needs to really be a public service, needs to be a single payer system where people can get the medicine that they need prescribed by their healthcare practitioners when they need it, because they need it, not based on their ability to pay. In that way, it needs to be a truly public system, not like this patchwork of weird public, private, coverage, insurance, whatever, not like that. We need a truly public program. Yeah. So, and we need it to be honestly universal. It can't just be for people who are very young or very old or very sick or very poor. It needs to be for everyone. Any of us at any moment, our health could change. We could need many medications. We might need one for a short term. We might develop a chronic illness or already have one. And we need care because we need it, not because we can afford it. So in that way, we need this program to be universal. And I'm kind of explaining this because it's been the trend that public programs are not really that public and they're not really that universal. So we need to change that trend when we're working for Pharmacare. And I know our intrepid guests and hosts are about to say a lot more about that, so maybe I'll leave it there. And this might sound like this is a big change. But handily, we already have a plan to make this happen. In around 2018, 2019, the Liberal government, this current federal Liberal government, commissioned a study about how we might implement Pharmacare in Canada if we ever wanted to do that. They hired their former Ontario Health Minister, Dr. Eric Hoskins, who you might know was the one who kind of brought in the partial sort of Pharmacare for people under 25 in Ontario. He was then brought on to run this huge study to find out what it would take to implement Pharmacare in Canada. And what he discovered, he talked to thousands of people, it took all the best research available, and the plan he came up with was public universal Pharmacare rolled out over the next 5 years. It had to include everyone, and it had to be a single payer comprehensive program. And this report exists. It's a roadmap, it's a clear 5-year plan to get there. And when it was presented to the Liberal government, what happened? Nothing. What we've seen since then is incredible growth in the amount of lobbying by pharmaceutical and insurance industry to prevent that from happening. We've seen drug prices soaring. I'm going to leave this to Avi to say a lot more fully than I will, but the point I'm trying to make here is that we need public universal pharmacare. There's a plan to get it, and it's up to us to organize to get there. So I'm going to bring up our host for the evening, Avi Lewis. You may know him as a broadcaster, a journalist, a documentary filmmaker. He's currently a professor at the University of British Columbia, teaching the first course in climate justice. And perhaps most famously, you may know him as Naomi Klein's partner. And so Avi, please come on up. Give a big round of applause to Avi.
Oh, that was awesome. That is exactly how, it's in my rider. If I'm not introduced as Naomi's partner, I'm out of here. So I'm really thrilled to be here, and I was really touched and excited when the Council of Canadians reached out to me about this fantastic and timely campaign. And it was an instant yes for me to go along on this national tour. And this is our sixth of at least a dozen. And I won't be able to do every single one, but this is the sixth town hall that I've done as part of this campaign. And it has been enraging, inspiring, emotional, and from an activist organizing point of view, really, really hopeful. People are coming to these rooms like you did tonight, ready to get to work. And what I'm going to do first is sort of frame this campaign, where it lands in the wider scheme of things, and then set out for you the case why I think it's a very timely idea and a perfect campaign that is winnable right now. And then I'm going to introduce four spectacular guests who I got a chance to meet beforehand, whom you will love. They'll all get a chance to say a couple of words, and then the organizers will come along and get us to work. Because I assume you came here ready to get to work to win universal public pharmacare, am I right? Okay. Well, that will be the climax to our evening this evening. So just save a little emotional energy for the time when it's time to get to work. And start thinking about what capacity you have, what kind of time you have, what kind of commitment you have to actually win this thing, because it is winnable. It's not a particularly hopeful time in the universe these days. Don't know if you've noticed. We're living in a time of multiple overlapping emergencies. We're seeing the result of decades of neoliberalism in our country that have been eroding the foundations of the welfare state. And we never got all the way to a truly egalitarian society, not even close. But we're in retreat now on so many fronts. These are predictable consequences of policy decisions that groups like the Council of Canadians have been calling out since the mid-1980s. But now we see the result. The retreat of government from funding public non-market housing means we're in a desperate housing emergency, along with all kinds of other economic policies that have made housing the center of wealth creation in Canada. And now we have an entire generation of young people who never will have the hope of owning a home. And all of the inequalities, racial inequalities, class inequalities, and other inequalities are being deepened by the housing emergency. The health emergency is better defined, I think, as a health system that's under active attack. Nobody knows this better than Ontarians, who just this past week have watched a major privatization, a piece of privatization legislation be rammed through at Queen's Park. And shame. What did Justin Trudeau say when Doug Ford announced his exciting plan to privatize the healthcare system? Justin Trudeau called it innovation. As long as the provinces don't whine about how little money the federal government is giving them for healthcare, they can do whatever they want. Only the people can fight back and reclaim our public healthcare system. It was a people's movement with Tommy Douglas, not as the hero, but as the head of the people's movement that won public healthcare in Canada in the first place. And we're going to need that again to protect it. We're living in a time of a true cost of living emergency. $7 chicken breasts are just the beginning of it. The Bank of Canada jacking up the interest rate to fight inflation in a completely misguided kind of ideological 1950s neoclassical economics idea that it's wages going up that is causing inflation and therefore they have to jack up the interest rates. We know that this cost of living crisis, this inflation crisis, is corporate price gouging. We know that. They're not doing anything about that. They're jacking up interest rates, and the Bank of Canada is forcing people out of their homes. This is a crisis. This is an emergency. And of course, we're living in a time of climate emergency, which for me, as I've given the last 12 or 15 years of my public life to trying to fight for, and organize around climate justice and climate justice solutions is the crisis that binds them all, is the message from the earth itself, that endless logic of extraction of value from people, extraction from the earth, is killing the earth and all life on it. And we need to change course. We need a change in the values that govern our society. That's what the climate emergency is telling us. And it really connects the dots among all the others. And of course, we have a democracy crisis. I'm not talking about foreign interference in our democracy. I'm talking about domestic interference in our democracy. Remember, your government here in Ontario is the one that was so excited to suspend the Constitution in order to prevent workers from having the right to organize. That was this past year. Not to mention many other crimes against democracy sponsored by our friends who hold a majority in Queen's Park. There is a threat that connects all of these crises. And Robin said it exactly. It's why the Council of Canadians exists. It's why we're here tonight. We have a deep imbalance in our society where corporations and their profits are prioritized above every human need. And this is at the heart of the housing crisis, of the cost of living crisis, of the climate crisis, of the crisis of inequality, and of racism. And it's certainly the case for Pharmacare. That is what we're up against. We're up against corporate power and corporate profits. We have some of the most concentrated power and wealth in the rich world. Think about it. We got 5 big banks. We got 5 big oil companies. We get 3 big supermarket chains. We got 3 big telecom companies. We had 4, but then one swallowed the other, and then now we got 3, and soon we'll have 2. And of course, we have big pharma, one of the most consolidated industries on earth. So it's no surprise that we pay outrageous prices for food. We pay the highest rates anywhere for the crappiest internet service, right? Okay, there's Rogers, Bell, TELUS, Shaw customers in the house because there's a few companies that collude and they give us terrible service and high prices. In every sector, it's the same. And in the sector of drugs, we pay the 3rd highest prices on earth for medicine here in Canada. Only among rich countries, the United States and Switzerland have higher prices for drugs. We are the only rich country on earth with a public healthcare system, with a universal public healthcare system that doesn't have Pharmacare as part of that universal public system. That's why we pay so much for drugs. And it's wrong. And we're going to change it. I want to give you a few reasons why I think this campaign is the right one at the right time. This is really a winnable campaign. Because we have so many things falling apart at once. We can't change everything at once. As much as I would love to see an anarcho-syndicalist democratic socialist revolution tomorrow, we have to confess that it might not happen. So we got to be smart about what we take on. And if we're going to get together and fight hard on something, we got to pick something that is winnable and that challenges the system that is driving all the other crises. And Pharmacare is, for me, that campaign right now. Because we have some of the highest drug prices in the world. It will be more efficient and more affordable across society to have a universal single-payer public system. But that means that one of the most powerful sectors, the private insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry, will lose profits. They will still be profitable. They will still increase their shareholder value. They will still develop and make drugs and sell them. But they will not make the cartoonish profits when we win public pharmacare. Pfizer made $50 billion last year alone from the COVID vaccine alone. No company on earth needs to make that kind of money. So when we win public pharmacare, we will be attacking the source of corporate power. We will actually be striking a blow against inequality and the accumulation of wealth in these huge corporations. And that's what makes it such an important campaign to win. It's also a common sense one. People, like it's like 90% of Canadians want public pharmacare. It's not a hard sell, right? When you go and say we need free transit, we need a Green New Deal, we need to keep oil and gas in the ground, you'll get a mix of people with different opinions, which is great. I'm all up for convincing people and winning those things too. But when you say we need single-payer public pharmacare for everybody, people are like, duh, yeah, and? So we have a very popular policy as well. And it's an efficient one. Because when we have a single-payer system, we are all in it together. And we'll get lower prices because we will be in a group plan of like 38 million people. So when the government goes to Big Pharma to negotiate the prices for drugs, they'll be bulk buying for the group of almost 40 million of us. That's the efficient way to do it. That's why it's going to lower costs so much. So the Liberals campaigned on Pharmacare, and as Robin said, they had the Hoskins report, which is a huge win for our movement for Pharmacare. And there's something else that's happened too of late that has made this, I think, more urgent and more winnable at the same time. When they got elected in 2015, the first Liberal government in Ottawa, the first health minister was Jane Philpott. Remember Jane? And, you know, it's not going to come as a shock to anyone that I'm not a Liberal. And I don't have a lot of time for Justin and that gang. My grandfather stood across that house of the floor of the House of Commons from his dad, and they had some big fights back in the 70s. And I was on David Lewis's side. I was 5, but I was still, you know, I was on Team Lewis. But, but Jane Philpott was a pretty good health minister. And she actually brought in a series of reforms to reclassify drugs, to get different country comparisons, to do some technical reforms that would dramatically lower the cost of medications without bringing in full pharmacare. She was ready to go halfway there. And as soon as she announced those plans, the pharmaceutical industry and the private insurance industry went to work, quadrupling, quintupling lobbying in Ottawa, relentlessly hammering at the government. They were kicking on an open door because the federal government is a corporate-friendly government, and they generally feel their constituency that they're accountable to are the people in the boardrooms, not the people in the kitchens and living rooms of the land. And so they, one by one, watered down, slowed down, took back, set aside all of these reforms that Jane Philpott proposed. She was out of cabinet after a little while. There was another election after a little while. And just recently, the very last reform from her suite of reforms was finally going to be implemented, saving a couple of $2 billion a year for the system. And at the 11th hour, at the very last minute, the federal health minister himself wrote a letter to the independent regulator, the Patented Medicines Price Review Board, and said, I think we just need a little more time to consult, a little bit more. In other words, industry talking point on my script in front of me, writing the industry talking point to the independent regulator, and they were essentially instructed by their minister not to proceed. 3 of them at the regulator resigned just in the last few months. And there's been a scandal, and there have been freedom of information requests. The federal NDP has been dragging these guys before the committee, and the health minister as well, and this scandal is ongoing. And the Liberals are a scandal-prone bunch. Scandals where they do favors for their friends and corporations have brought them down before. They're trailing in the polls behind the Tories. And this is a time when they don't need another big scandal. So this is a perfect time to push for this policy. So what tonight is going to be about is hearing from people with personal stories. And I think some of you in the audience may even have personal stories about struggling with the cost of medications. I'd love to hear from you if you have a story like that. I know our panelists do. Inoculating ourselves and educating ourselves with the information and the arguments that we need when we go out and engage with our neighbors on this subject, and then getting our marching orders to go out there and work to win. So here, before we do the rest of the program, I just want to give you a summary of 5 reasons why I think this is the right campaign at the right time. 5 winning conditions for public pharmacare now. First of all, the Liberals have already promised it. Now this is the weakest of the reasons because it's Liberals promising things. But they have promised it, and Secondly, they have a minority government, and they have signed a confidence and supply agreement with the federal NDP. Now, it's a deal that I think has some flaws, and one of the flaws is that there aren't enough specifics to hold them to. And in Pharmacare, it's a little fuzzier than it should be. But they are committed in the agreement that keeps them in power, that keeps them in government at a time when an election might mean losing power. There is a commitment to Pharmacare, a Pharmacare framework this year. So it's in the agreement that keeps them in power. That's a pretty powerful tool for us to use. It's our job to show that it's massively popular, that they have to do the whole thing, and they have to get real about it, and they have to get on it because they've been dragging their feet. Third, we've got the Hoskins report, and it is a powerful document. It's got a lot of powerful personal stories in it. In fact, one of the activists who's been on a bunch of the panels, Bill Swan, started this website called Faces of Pharmacare, of just taking pictures of people and letting them tell their stories of struggling with the cost of medication. And he was asked, because this website is so awesome, he was asked to contribute those sections of the report that had people's personal stories. So the Hoskins report itself is like an organizing tool. And the fact that the Liberal government commissioned it, and the fact that it comes to exactly the right conclusion, makes it a very powerful tool for us. Fourth, of course, is the scandal, the fact that it's still unfolding, the fact that the Liberals are vulnerable on this at the moment. And fifth, and the final reason that we can actually win this thing, is that this is a story, this is a political demand. This is a campaign that is about people. There's a lot of facts and figures, complex formulas and formularies and complicated acronyms in the Pharmacare field, but when you strip it all down, it is about people having to pay for life-giving medications. It's about people making heart-rending choices between food and medicine, between rent and medicine. People who experience hardship get sicker and die for lack of basic medicine in this rich country. And that's why people are at the heart of this campaign, and we're going to win it with people because it's something that everybody can relate to. And that's why tonight, you're going to hear some of those stories, and then I think you're going to be moved to act. So first of all, just actually before we get to the panel, if anyone has a question or a story to share, I want to make sure that you feel included in this. If there's anyone who wants to speak from the audience about an experience with Pharmacare, whether it's the price of medication or it's someone that you know, or if you have any questions for the folks who are going to come up and speak, no pressure. I know London is a very retiring location where people are kind of soft-spoken and meek, right? And we have this fantastically exciting squishy cube microphone. You can actually hurl around. You guys have seen it in this room before? Excellent. Yeah. No, you can totally do that. I'm open. Go ahead.
Thank you. I guess I have the squishy mic. That's
You got it. Yeah, just speak into the top, sir.
All right. I do have personal experience with the Pharmacare in my family, but it's more based in the U.S., and we already know the horror stories there. I am curious, though, how the listing of pharmaceuticals and treatments in our public system is playing into the hands of the commercial corporations that are trying to sell us even more things.
Great comment, and and a great question. In Pharmacare, we've had this said at many of our events so far. We have a Canadian public health care system that we're very proud of, and it is very different from the United States. But when it comes to drugs, we have exactly the system in the United States. There is only private insurance. There are some provincial programs, but for most Canadians, it's private insurance. That's what they struggle with in the States. If you don't have private insurance, you're out of luck. And that's where our systems are most similar. And I think most Canadians don't realize that.
Thank you for what you're doing tonight. I have a question, maybe for the panel, that they can clarify.
Just lean into your cube a little bit closer.
Squish it.
Oh, squish it a little closer. That's it. Perfect.
And how is the Pharmacare going to help marginalized folks, especially those with mental health issues?
How is public pharmacare going to help marginalized communities with mental health issues? What a beautiful question. All right, we'll make sure that that comes up in the discussion. There's someone in the back row here, V.
Oh. Okay. So I'm here. Thank you, everybody, and all the activists and crowd, and Avi for spending your time here. I am from 2 Indigenous First Nations, and I've been trying to have some discussions. So, and the chief and council aren't on board because they believe it doesn't affect them, but it will. And I'm just wondering, in your experience, what the response has been and what your consultation has been like, and how I can further build some catalyst, well, create awareness and basically for like urban and rural communities as well. So, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you don't want to hear it. Oh. And the thing is, it's fun.
There, throwing it around
Hello?
is part of the game. Thank you. You got it.
Yeah, so my, whoa.
Yeah, just split the difference. That's good.
Okay.
Be close.
So my question pertains to the Ontario drug formulary. In other words, people who are on ODSP
Yep.
or individuals like me who are turning 65 will now get free medication or with a small copayment.
Right.
However, the only medications that we're entitled to are those medications on the Ontario Drug Benefit Formulary. So my question is, what if the drugs that you need are not covered? So why should I advocate for Pharmacare if the limits that are presented by the government mean that even if you have it, I'm not going to get what I need?
Great question.
I
Great
have
question.
lots of
Great questions.
Okay, well, then thank you for rationing them for us tonight. Shall we bring up the panelists and start cracking into some of these?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So come on up, everybody. Sit behind your names, and I'll introduce you as you come. I'm going to start with Rebecca. Rebecca Redmond is a storyteller and advocate who has been sharing her story around type 1 diabetes on the global stage. And Rebecca has machines that beep and, and a distant relation to Dr. Frederick Banting, who was the co-discoverer of insulin. So that's pretty cool. We got some family history there. Erin, why don't you come up as well? Erin Little is a patient advocate committed to protecting Canadians from excessively expensive prescription drugs. Erin has appeared on a number of panels with us and has in particular been involved in raising awareness about cystinosis, which is a rare disease that her daughter lives with. And Erin is turning into a fiery advocate and powerful public speaker on the subject. Nicole, come on up, Nicole. Nicole Davis is a community advocate at Lifespin and a recent graduate of Western Sociology program. Oh, looks like you got your pen group here, Erin. Excellent. Lifespin is a frontline service that I'm sure you're all familiar with, dealing with immediate crisis and problems faced by low-income individuals and families. And we have also here Dr. Ava John-Baptiste. Dr. John-Baptiste is an associate professor with appointments in the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatics and other departments that I can barely pronounce, like perioperative medicine. Ava conducts research on the safety, effectiveness, and cost effectiveness of health technologies, not just medicines, but medical devices and others. So, Rebecca, let me start with you. And so So we have a number of questions from the audience, and if anyone feels like taking on any of them, I'll quickly summarize. Well, the first was about how far public pharmacare can help marginalized communities with mental health challenges. There was also a question about how to advance the cause of public pharmacare in Indigenous communities, both urban and on reserve. Am I right? Yes. We've got a question about formularies, and I think that one might be a good one for you, Ava, about what drugs will be covered and why fight for something if the thing that you need might not be on the list. And let's start with those. But tell us your personal story, and if you happen upon reflections on any of the questions on the way, don't get undermined by it. But, feel free to read it.
Sounds great. Do you need the mic?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, okay.
Even with a loud voice for the recording, it's better if you.
No, so I'm so sorry.
Tap it again.
You would think with all these medical devices, I would be somewhat tech savvy, but I'm not. Is that good?
Yeah,
Okay. So thank you everybody for the opportunity to be here and share my experiences. I always love to talk about type 1 diabetes. Most people blame us for the condition or get really bored, so I'm grateful to have a captive audience to share a little bit tonight. So as mentioned, I do have a connection to Dr. Banting, who started out in London. If you live in London, then you know that we are the birthplace of insulin. I also like to think that we're the birthplace of access to medication, as Banting and Best and Collop took those patents that they received in 1923 and sold them for $1 each to the University of Toronto. It is not lost on me that today is May 17th, because it was May 17th, 1921 that Dr. Banting met Dr. Best, so today is kind of a special day for me to be here and share my story.
That's cool.
So needless to say, it's been 100 years or more since that event happened, and we still have Canadians in dire need of access to not just insulin, but the medical devices that keep us going. I am one of those people. My connection to Dr. Banting did not grant me a free ride or free pass with this illness. I have been paying out of pocket since the age of 17. Doesn't sound like much when I say it that way, but when you look at it, there are type 1 diabetics in this country that pay $18,000 annually to stay alive. If you are earning minimum wage here in Ontario, that is 2/3 of your annual income to stay alive. So it is not lost on me when I go to the pharmacy and I ask for my medications and devices, and I still have coverage now through my government, through my husband's work, and through private care, and it still costs me $5,000 or more a year out of pocket.
That's shameful.
I pick and choose my medicines at the pharmacy, and the pharmacist down there knows me and is quite sad because he pushes it all my way. And I literally have to go, what do I need? What can I afford? And I have to find some balance in between that allows me to still parent, work, be active in my community, and do things like sit up here today. So that's a little bit about my story, why I'm here, and why I'm trying to fight so hard to get access to our medications that keep us alive and to the devices that can help us and alleviate pressures on the system later on down the road.
Beautiful. Thank you. Let's keep it on. Go ahead, Erin.
Are you on with me?
Yeah. We like to mix it up. Keep you out.
Thank
Keep
you.
you in balance.
Oh, I don't know if I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm not ready.
Take your time.
I'm not a patient, but when I hear patients talk, it just sheds a different light, because it's such a privilege to be the mother of the patient and not the patient. And I always have to be careful with my words because I'm not the patient. So it is with much grace that I sit next to Rebecca. And London is we're from Port Elgin. I'm Olivia's mom. She's 13. She has the rare disease cystinosis, and also comes with
chronic kidney disease and a whole bunch of other fun stuff along the way. So I'm extremely grateful for London and Children's Hospital. And today, when I was here, to save $10 and pay for in parking, I made it convenient for me to stop. I want to thank everybody first I was really looking forward to coming to London because of all that. And so, it's a Wednesday evening and you're here, and for that, I'm grateful. So today I had to swing into London's pharmacy. We've been here since 2011 when Livy was diagnosed. Took a helicopter to get here.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is Olivia's prescription Cystagon. This is the drug one of the drugs that keeps Olivia alive. She has to take this drug every 4 hours. This, along with other pills, which equals 17 pills, 4 times a day. She throws them back with 1 swallow. It's pretty impressive. She has since she's been 10. And these 7 boxes of medication will get her 8 weeks of her therapy. Again, just 1 drug of many. This is $4,377.24 worth of medication for her. This pharmaceutical company and this climate change and packaging, all this garbage that comes with it. This company bought the rights from a company in the US, and now they hold all countries except the US rights to sell Cystagon. We used to pay for this a couple $1,000s a year.
A year.
A year before they bought the rights and brought the drug to Canada. These drug companies are for making money, and they're sneaky, and they know what they can get away with. And this is why we need the public Pharmacare, because where's Nick and his Costco? It's like Costco. When we buy in bulk, we can sell it to people for cheaper. The government needs to be Costco when it comes to drugs. And this is just one drug. So in 2019, the same company brought, our daughter also has to take hourly eye drops to the corneas build up crystals in her eyes. And it's the same drug. It's just a different delivery mechanism. And this is notorious amongst pharma. They did not create a new drug. This drug did not come with any less side effects. She still is nauseous and constipated, doesn't have an appetite, same side effects. It's not more innovative, nothing. It just costs us more. And they use fear tactics for patients like us in the rare disease community and say that we will not have innovation, and it's bullshit. They know what they're doing. The company who got the eye drops and brought them to Canada, we used to pay hundreds of dollars a year. And I think it was under $5 for the drops that she has to take. No, Livy has to take these drops hourly. And if there's any doctors in here, or any patients, you know that the less times you have to take a drug, the more compliant that you are. It's easier from a lifestyle standpoint. And the piece that, and patients should have the right to these medicines. But again, we were paying hundreds of dollars for our pharmacy to compound them. The company brought this drug to Canada, same drug, and it's over $100,000 a year. And it is given 4 times a day. And actually, the side effects are worse. So this drug landed our family on national television and the cover of Globe and Mail. No parent wants to do that to their child. And this is the question about the formulary. When that news story broke, everybody just heard that this drug was really expensive. And we had people calling us and wanting to set up GoFundMes and give us money. I'll never forget the retired cop from Toronto. He's like, I can't give much, but I can pay 1 month for your daughter to have these eye drops. And we pushed fear aside as a family, and I said, nope, I knew the right thing would happen. And they are covered. Again, we won a genetic lottery, and we won a rare disease drug lottery in Canada as well. And even to break it down even more, in Ontario, because our province is the golden ticket when you usually have something compared to others. I lost what I was saying. It's happened, the formulary. Oh, so, and I'm going to touch on the Indigenous, and I speak from my heart, and I'm not always the best with words, and I just pray that this comes out so you hear what I'm about to kind of explain. Olivia is this stereotypical cystinosis causes most, not all patients to be blonde hair, blue eyes. Idealistic in a world where we are so conditioned to see that. And then we get put on the news, and it's really easy to want to give to this cute blonde kid in pigtails. And I worried about all the other patients in our community with cystinosis who weren't going to get the same attention because they didn't, by luck, I don't know why we were the family that got contacted. But then, and we didn't take any money, and the Ontario did the right thing. But the other thing is like through our advocacy work for cystinosis in our small little town, people know our story, our family, we've chosen to put it out there. And one day our optometrist called and said, there's a single mom who she's struggling with her daughter's illness and they can't figure out what's going on with her. And she happened to be an Indigenous woman. We have Saugeen's First Nations right next door to us. And I always think about, would she have the same luck of people that would want to call and give her money? And she deserves it just as much. And this is where if we can convince our government to give us one formulary and everything goes on, and you get access no matter what it is, because even with Ontario Plus, or OHIP Plus, when OHIP Plus was here, Olivia's kidney disease, some of the drugs were not covered even on this fantasy of OHIP Plus. So we need to demand that nobody is left behind. Everybody, every drug, every mental health. I mean, we have so many things to fix that access to a drug needs to automatically on there, and we can fight for that. We are one when we come together and see each other for the human beings that we all are.
Wow. I'm just taking a moment to honor the power and vulnerability of what you shared today. That's it, isn't it? We're one. The answer to a deeply unequal system, which is racist, and which is heavily biased against people of lower socioeconomic status, people who have any kind of vulnerability or marginal status, lost the lottery in modern day capitalism, going all the way back to the beginning of colonialism. And the white supremacy on which our system is based. Only truly universal public services can start to address and redress those deep inequalities in our society. Only fully universal public services. And that's why when we were in Toronto, we had Hassan Syed from the Migrant Workers Alliance connecting the fight for public pharmacare to the fight for status for all, for regularization of all people who live and work in this stolen land, and not deporting migrant workers when they get sick because they don't have private health insurance, because they're not included in the public system. So even the public health system that we're so proud of is still excluding marginalized communities like migrant workers. That's why we say truly universal public services for everyone. And Nicole, that's what you work on every day, I think. So grab that mic. There's a red button at the bottom that you may want to press. Yeah, just hold that down for a second. And then you'll see a little thing in the display there.
Hello? Okay. Great. So the clients I will be speaking about today, they initially came to me for assistance in filling out their ODSP applications. And upon further discussion about their health, I found these clients had inadequate access to Pharmacare, largely due to their low incomes. I'll be giving my clients pseudo names today so I can talk about them freely. And we'll start with Joe, 60-year-old single male living with type 2 diabetes that has resulted in significant associated complications, including cardiac autonomic neuropathy, which causes cardiac disorders. His business went under during the pandemic, and he has since shifted to a low income and is now a recipient of Ontario Works. He was unable to receive ongoing medical care because he had no family doctor. Therefore, he had no one who could prescribe him the medication that he needed. After a trip to a walk-in clinic following a medical emergency, he was able to secure a referral to see a specialist. He was prescribed several medications by this specialist to manage his diabetes and his heart condition. This cost him about $200 a month. A maximum allowance on Ontario Works is $733 a month. He struggles to keep groceries in his home and pay his rent because the costs of his medications are so high. He has since applied for Trillium in the meantime, but I have personally looked into his prescription history to see if Trillium will cover his medications, and many are not covered, or if they are the generic brands, which are not as effective in managing his health conditions. So for now, he pays the extra cost out of pocket for the more effective brand name medications. My second client, we'll call her Jane, 52-year-old single female living with COPD and severe arthritis in both her knees and her feet. She's employed part-time and is on Ontario Works. She has no medical coverage through her work and is not paying into any insurance plans because she cannot afford it. Trillium does not cover the medications that would be most effective in managing her pain. Since she cannot afford them, she goes without. For her COPD, she takes Arnuity Ellipta. Without health insurance coverage, a single breath-activated aerosol inhaler of Arnuity Ellipta costs $263. This is enough for 30 activations once a day, which means each daily dose costs about $9. Over 12 months of her treatment, she pays up to $3,000 full retail price a year for this medication. As a brand name prescription medication, Arnuity Ellipta is sold at a premium price, and unfortunately there are no lower cost options like generic versions, over-the-counter medicines, or supplements available to Arnuity Ellipta users. She receives a maximum allowance from her Ontario Works check for about $733 a month, which means she spends 1/4 of her check monthly to cover just her COPD medication alone. My third female client I'll be talking about, we'll call her Lynn, 47-year-old female, married with children, living with severe bilateral plantar fasciitis and anemia. She's a recent immigrant, an Ontario Works recipient, and she was not aware of any provincial drug benefit programs at the time when she came to see me. Up until this point, she had been paying for medications out of pocket. What is considered expensive is very subjective. For those living on a maximum allowance of $733 a month, a $20 to $40 medication could mean the difference between having enough groceries for the week or not. She went without her medication many times because of the financial restraints experienced by her and her family. Luckily, she is aware of these programs now, and we've made plans to help her apply for these drug programs that are available to her.
Hold on, Nicole. Keep the mic for 1 second. I just want to ask you a follow-up question. It's a lot of human reality that you experience in the day at work. And I'd love it if you could speak to us personally about, about what that's like for you. Because I respect that you were trying to give us a sense of your client's reality.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about a society that's based on an economy of care. rather than an economy of profit.
Right.
An economy that actually runs on the connective tissue of care, the ways that we take care of each other and the earth. And so we need to be able to see everyone in the care equation. I'd love to just know a little bit more about your own experience of what this work is like.
It can be very emotional, especially when I see the elderly and folks who are disabled or on ODSP go without. They already make so little from either their pension benefits or ODSP itself, and then for them to go without the medications they need because they can't afford it or the drug plan doesn't cover it, it absolutely breaks my heart, and it, quite honestly, it enrages me because the government is supposed to be here for them, for us, and they keep failing to show up and, you know, support just everyone in general. There was one question about those struggling with mental illnesses. How will Pharmacare help them? How will it support them? It's my hope that, especially with the economy being as it is right now, everyone is, well, not everyone, but lots of us are struggling to make ends meet. That once their medication is covered, this is one burden off their shoulders. They can afford their medication is covered. They can take time and care for themselves, to care for their health, their mental health, which is the most important thing, not worrying about how am I going to afford my medication.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much to the Council of Canadians for inviting me to this event. Really, it is a honor, I think, to hear and from my fellow panelists and share the stage with these truly brave individuals. And I'm inspired by you. And thank you for sharing your stories, and thank you for fighting for access to medications. I'm a health economist here at Western University, and I have my definition of health economics that I give to my students. It's concerned with the optimal way to allocate scarce resources to support the goal of improving or maintaining health. So obviously, it deals with a very challenging subject that we're talking about here today. I am in favor of national pharmacare. I appreciate Avi's very thorough yet concise summary of the issue, so I don't really have much to add to that. The Hoskins report that Avi referenced that was published in 2019 estimated that there would be system-wide savings of close to $5 billion annually with the implementation of a national pharmacare program. You know, of course, those savings would occur in society, but the challenge is there would be shifts in cost, right, out of the pockets of individuals who now pay out of pocket significantly for medications and to the public purse. And so therein lies the challenge, right, to get the political will. I believe in part, if I would just add to Avi, that we did have a fair amount of momentum prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah. And I feel that kind of the spending associated with the pandemic slowed that momentum. But I do agree that this is a time to advocate. I wanted to talk a little bit about the corporations, pharmaceutical companies as corporations, and the pricing of the medications, because that's one of the challenges that we face, right? So the pharmaceutical industry has incentives in place to develop what we call new drugs, to innovate and develop new drugs to treat diseases. As a person who requires medication myself and as a family member, I think in general, we certainly appreciate that they're continually innovating. However, and so because of the costs of drug development and then the requirements to test the drugs for safety and effectiveness in the form of trials, which yes, they are very expensive, the pharmaceutical industry tries to recoup those costs. The challenges, though, that I think that aren't reflected in the pricing are that, so I'm not a basic scientist, but we've got researchers who are paid by here at Western who spend a lot of time understanding how our bodies work, how diseases progress, and they're not starting from scratch, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think that the pricing structures are appropriate, and they don't reflect the public investment that's gone in to the knowledge base that they use in order to develop new drugs. I do want to answer the question about how drugs get onto the ODB formulary and the ODSP and other provincial programs. And so there's a process at the drug programs branch whereby the pharmaceutical companies themselves are required to make submissions and demonstrate that submit trial information, so those expensive trials I talked about. And those are necessary because you don't want to give people something that's not been tested. But anyhow, they submit that information to demonstrate safety and effectiveness. And they also submit estimates of cost effectiveness, and those submissions are reviewed by independent academics, and the judgment on whether or not to pay for the drugs and to list them on the formulary is based on a combination of those factors. It's largely driven by safety and effectiveness. It is an important process because I think in part it counteracts the excesses of the pharmaceutical industry in that it provides the opportunity to vet the drugs and also to negotiate on the price, to say that bring it down and that will be cost effective, and then we'll list it. And it is challenging. I believe that the person who posed the question cited, thank you for the question. Even the Hoskins report, you are absolutely correct, advocates that for phased implementation of Pharmacare, that would begin with a list of necessary, a list of medications that have been vetted in a very similar way, effectiveness and cost effectiveness. And so that's part of the challenging issue, but they also advocated also for developing stream to provide access to drugs for rare diseases and conditions as well, which, based on the criteria of cost effective, don't often come out as cost effective using those criteria, but understanding the need for equity and access. So challenging issues, especially as we deal with the other challenges in the healthcare system of emergency department wait times, of access to family doctors, etc. But I do believe that Pharmacare is a cross-cutting issue that will help to address those other challenges. And so I think it's something that should be pursued.
Thank you. I want to pose one more question to the panel as a kind of transition into the next phase of our time together. I've been teaching this first course on climate justice at UBC, as Robin mentioned. And I have about 70 students who are all, mostly young people in their early 20s in their undergraduate life, coming into a room to talk about climate justice. And they are all coming with questions about how we live in this world and what the heck is going on out there. And they have a huge amount of anxiety and sadness and a sense of pre-loss about the future that we're all headed into. And they come to these rooms, as we come here tonight, carrying a lot of sadness, a lot of pain. And I look at their faces and they're asking me, whether overtly or wordlessly, what do we do? How do we live with this? And it's a big responsibility as a teacher, and Ava, I know you feel this too, to try to answer that question, but all I can do is say what I do. And what I do is I organize. What I do is I take all of that anxiety and fear and rage, and I put it into action. And for me, being a climate activist, being a climate justice activist, which also means fighting for universal public services for everyone on all of the issues, it makes me feel better. It connects me to people who are also in struggle. It actually makes me, it's a way that, it's a coping mechanism that I hope actually helps improve things. But there's lots of other ways to deal with all of these hard feelings that come up when we confront the extreme injustices of our society. And so for 4 very engaged people who have shared such powerful stories with us tonight, and for you to think about yourself, I just want to do a quick round for each of you and ask you, what do you do with all of the rage that you feel at the unfairness, with all of the pain that you feel at the suffering and the choices that you're forced to make? How do you make sense of it? How do you keep going? And what do you do with all of that negative emotion that is driving your daily experience of all this unfairness? And anyone who wants to grab a mic, I'd love to hear from any and all of you. Rebecca, talk to us.
I'll jump in. I can touch on the mental health aspect of things, as I am also someone who lives with mental illness. So mental illness was, actually my first of many chronic conditions, and I was diagnosed long before I had type 1 diabetes. So one thing that I do, and I have a 13-year-old, so I like to think that in some way I'm a teacher as a parent.
Oh, you definitely are.
I tell the kids, you have to feel the feelings, whatever those feelings are. We've been taught for so long to dehumanize ourselves, to not talk about those things. It's not okay to talk about not being okay, but it heckin' is. Our 13-year-old came home the other day and he was quite upset with the state of the world. He is very proactive. Jagmeet Singh is his hero. He follows him like a rock star. I have a brooding advocate at home, and sometimes the world is a lot. And we literally sat on the couch and he's like, Mom, I don't know what to do. I just think I need to cry a little and then I'll know where I feel. So we literally sat and held each other and we cried and we felt those sad feelings, and it lasted about 5 minutes, and then he's like, I feel better and like now I know what I want to do. And he was upset about the climate report that their school had gotten and how students felt in the school, and he's like, I think I feel really empowered now to go and make some suggestions to the teachers and to rally for those younger kids and make them feel safer at school. So I feel the feelings. Whatever those feelings are, feel them all the way through. No one's telling you have to stop. Just feel them till you're done feeling them. So that's what I do. That's my fix to it all. And once you get through that, you've shed that kind of cloud that's around you, and you have a little bit of focus, and perspective is everything, right? You come out on the other side and it looks a little different. May not be better. Progress is progress, not perfection, right? So feel those feelings.
Beautiful. Thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead, Erin.
For me, how I deal with this is to just keep showing up to work, because as long as I'm at work and I'm helping people, I like to think that I'm a part of the solution and not the problem. Right. And so it's just very important for me to keep showing up to work and advocating for my clients and coming to events like these and putting their stories out there for folks like you to hear.
Amazing.
Very personal, sure. I am a believer, so daily prayer and time in meditation and scripture is just how I get through the crazy world. Yeah. And then of course quality time with family and friends, serving through church and that sort of a thing is how I get through.
Beautiful.
Jesus flipped tables, so I flip tables. I don't, you know, last night, and I know there's some great people in this room that have offered their homes too for us to all stay at. And last night in deep conversation about, especially in Ontario, with this like heaviness of like the privatization, and it's heavy. Like and we're going through this process of like raising our own children of heaviness and everything, and it goes back to, you know, sorry to any vegetarians or vegans, but it's that one bite at a time. And again,
I didn't say bite of what?
What? Elephant.
One bite of okra at a time.
It is this constant, I go through, it's this like these peaks and valleys of feelings of anger, and tonight, like I didn't know where all this sadness came from. Like it just kind of came, and accepting it, but not staying there and not staying in the fear. But it's just like, what can we do today? And some days it's nothing. I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to wake up and I'm probably not going to sleep. I'm going to think about all the things that we can do or should and shouldn't do. And it's just taking tomorrow, and tomorrow might not be anything, but I might be out for a run and say, this is what we should do. And it's that moment. And you know, I've hustled for hope for years, and I'm done living hope. I want to hustle. And the government works for us.
Yeah.
For us. And this is the thing that, like, I forget, and we have to make them listen to us, and we can. We just have to we have to come together and just and take the actions that we're going to talk about next.
Right on. Erin's got it. You're hosting the next one. Okay, what are we going to do tonight?